What was most interesting to me after I had flapped my lips for 40 minutes or so, it was so interesting to me, and I told a couple people that it's like the old Zen saying is you open your mouth and you've drawn a line in the sand, and that's a pretty complex statement, meaning that you can't talk about both sides at the same time. You just can't do it. It isn't possible, right? And I think a number of you all know that I heard this probably 40 years ago. This first time I ever heard the old Southern saying. I think it actually from Georgia. I'm from Tennessee, and we don't like Georgia, by the way. But anyway, I think it's from Georgia. And the saying is, it's a mighty thin plank that ain't got two sides. That's a very, can you think of a plank that doesn't have two sides? I mean, how thin would it have to be? How thin would anything have to be to not have two sides, right? I mean, it's a profound statement. And I told somebody if Carl Jung, right, had ever, if he'd been from the South, he might have even heard it. But if anyone would ever have made up that statement, it would have been old Carl Jung. It's a mighty thin plank that ain't got two sides. It's also, it's just the essence of the Zen, what they're trying to teach. So what was interesting for me last week is, so I'm talking and I'm giving you all these Zen koans, and I don't know. I don't want to say desperate, but I'm really talking and blabbing. And at the end of it, I had this thought as afterwards, I thought, what was so, it's almost like we should have stopped at the end of 40 minutes, and then I should have just kept going and talked about the how important the other side of it is. Just sitting quietly, your meditation practice being about stillness and silence. You can't talk about both at the same time, and so the Zen koans are all about the thing about keeping the mind alert and active, and to some extent, certainly just sitting, but really what we do in mindfulness is about the stillness. It was really interesting to me to see how it was impossible for me to hold both sides of the mighty thin plank. I couldn't do it, right, because I talked about one side. Is this still on? Yeah. I was just talking about, I could only talk about one side. And you really, this is not a defensive statement. I'm sure it is. I don't think you'll ever hear a teacher speak from both sides of their mouth. It just isn't possible. You can talk about this side of the truth and you talk about that side of the truth. But you can't talk about both sides of the truth simultaneously because our mind doesn't do that. Only a mind that is capable of coming from total emptiness perhaps can do that. And I have a sad announcement to make at this point about my mind. It can't do that. So in reading the Zen stories for 20 years, I think some of you have heard this, but I used to, you hear these teachers, and they'll get kind of pissed off with their students. And so they'll say, well, you board carrying fellow. And I remember I used to read that and think, what does that mean? You board carrying fellow. And then I read something one time that said they had the image of someone carrying a board on their back. And then finally it dawned on me, it's a mighty thin plank that ain't got two sides. That's exactly what that board carrying that they were talking about is that mighty thin plank that we all carry. This idea of that reality is two things, right? And so I was kind of, I guess I was kind of pleased with myself to think that I had enough sense to realize how extraordinary that old Southern saying was. So, I guess I'll just go on and do this because I had something to do in the beginning, and because an interesting thing that happened to me where I live, and well, that's a kind of interesting statement, and but I'm already into this, so I'm just going to say two little things about these Zen koans. So here's one that I love. I mean, this is not a koan, by the way. This is a wonderful story. So I love Jiao Joy. Chou, I believe. Doesn't look like Jiao Zhou, does it? And sometimes I think like in maybe the Chinese begins with C, but I believe you can see it also, they'll spell it with a Z. But anyways, his name was pronounced Jiaozhou. Now, I can tell you why I love Jiaozhou more than anything is because he didn't even start his teaching until he was 80 years old. Well, I'm 75. He didn't start teaching until he was 80, and he died at 120. You know, there's hope for all of us, right? I mean, right, if he lasted to 120, I mean, but that is supposedly, it's really even in the records. I mean, you read it, I think Jiaozhou was, I'm going to say 600, I'm going to say like around 600 to 700 AD. But I mean, you read that over and over and over, and they have these, you know, they started the records all the way back to Bodhidharma, back to 500. So, I mean, it's hard to believe, but you read it over and over that he lasted to 120. So, I mean, I've liked him ever since. I thought, you've got to have something right if you can last to 120. Most of us, by the time we would hit, you know, I was reading, and somebody said, they did an interview with some lady that I think she's like 130. It was on the, you know, I get that News Digest on my app, and they asked her, what does she want? And she said, I just want to die. I know from where she comes, right? I mean, at 130, you say, well, you know, so apparently her body just would not cooperate, right? I remember my mother, my mother was 99, and the doctor said, that heart's going to go on for her. She had a wonderful heart. You know, it just kept going. So Jiaozhou, I love Jiaozhou, and you all would too. There's really some of the major koans that you read in the Zen John is they were his, and they're just wonderful. So anyway, he's sweeping in the monastery, sweeping. Well, let's say he's probably like a young man of 115 by then, right? Sweeping. And his student, one of his senior students, says, Master, where does dust come from? Huh? Where does dust come from? So he keeps sweeping, and he says, it comes from outside. So the student then says, well, this monastery is spotless. It's as clean as anything could be. So how could it be coming from anywhere? So he keeps on sweeping, and he says, I see a little bit more of the dust. So what was he saying? So do you get what he was saying? The questions, that was the dust. The students asking the questions, right? So I see a little bit more. So he's saying to us that all of these thoughts, all of these questions, all of these discriminating, this is the dust that we keep spreading out. There's an old saying that says a fish can't go through water without muddying the water. So open your mouth or eyes. Let's open our mouth and not muddy the water. Or the other one that says the bird can't fly over without feathers falling. I like that one, being a bird. So old Jiaozhou just, you know, so I mean I think the story is the student actually woke up when he heard the teacher say that. I see just a little. So he says, so how could there be dust in this spotless monastery? How could there be dust in this mind? He's spreading dust by asking the question, right? If you say so, I mean, if he's the monastery, if the monastery is clear and clean and there's nothing, and then the mind starts asking a question, there's the dust. So I love that one. And the other one that I wanted to share with you all was, I love this, and so this is more back to what we were doing today. By the way, I've had this thought many times. I think I've said this one time. I really have had the thought that Travis should make a lovely, beautiful sign. You could do this, Travis. Maybe put a little glitter on it on the door. A little glitter. There's nothing wrong with a little glitter. Put a little sign on the door that says the no waiting room. Why not, you know? The no waiting room. It's, Well, this is beginning to drive me berserk. I'm going to throw this. So we wait. We spend our lives waiting. You know. Unfortunately, as Allison, when you start your group, which we will be, what's going to come is the Grim Reaper. But we spend our lives waiting, and the conundrum of how to see that and to work with that and to work with this idea that meditation is about being alive every moment, living every moment. Just knowing that and I suppose I would say aspiring to that. I said this on Tuesday in our Tuesday morning class. And and it is really it's just real to me when I say it. It's not like words. Every single breath is a moment of waking up. It's an extraordinary moment, right? Each one. It's new. Did you ever see a breath in the past? It's brand new. It's like something coming in that is that can potentially wake you up, and so I think it's so. It's like it's just right there for you. It's not like this mystery. Oh, how can I wake up? I don't know what that. I mean, it's no mystery. It's right there. That fresh breath, that can wake us up. And so we're given this unbelievable gift. So many times the teachers talk about the jewel, a jewel in the lotus or the jewel in the palm. But I mean, we're given this unbelievable gift of awakening. And in contrast to that is this part of us that seems to need to wait for the next moment. This one isn't good enough. If I wait for the next moment, that one might be better, right? And so there we are. So we wait. So it's our inclination. In some ways, waiting seems to be our inclination. So I'm just saying we're going to put a sign that says "No waiting allowed." Well, that's a new rule. Allowed. Maybe just the no waiting room. So I was going to. This is a wonderful old koan I wanted to share with you all, and because it's really completely about what we're talking about sitting, and then maybe I'll just stop in a minute. Stopping is one of the most difficult things to do. All right, so this is called calling the master, and. Now this guy, just to get this, these Chinese people, what are you going to do with them? His name is spelled Ruyyan. Ruyyan. How would you pronounce that? It's pronounced Zrayan. What are you going to do? Zrayan. It really is ZWAY-YN. And so that you get out of Ruyyan. But anyway, it's okay. I don't want to criticize the Chinese. They're an old civilization. And so they have given us the great Chan masters. So in my book, they get a lot. Okay, so this is a really wonderful thing. I've read this, and you read this in different koan books. I've read this my favorite teacher, Da Wei, has this in his book. So every day, Zrayan would call to himself, Master. And he would answer himself, yes. Okay. So here he's sitting and says, Master. And then he said, yes. Then he would say, be awake. Be alert. And then he would say, yes. Say, from now on, don't be fooled by anyone. And he would say, yes, yes. Now, those of us in the mindfulness game, right? So this is Chinese, right? This is John. So I suppose if we would say, from our tradition, you would say, rather than be alert, be awake, perhaps he would say to himself, be mindful. Be mindful. That's the same thing. Be mindful, be alert, be awake. So, I mean, from our tradition, we might say be mindful. So, Wu Mong, who collected these, that's another name, but we don't. When people studying the way do not perceive reality, it's just because they still recognize the conscious spirit, which actually is pretty much an expression of the personality. That thing inside myself that I call, Victor, they would refer that to as the conscious spirit. It's not. It's still what Teresa might call the small self. It's not the big self. The small self is my identification. Ryan says my name is Ryan, right? That would be the small self, right? But they call that the conscious spirit. It's also interesting because they also call it emotional consciousness, which I find very fascinating. Emotional consciousness would be the same thing as the conscious spirit, and it would also be, what as I said, we might call it the small self. But also, I think simply we call it the personality. And he says it is the root of infinite eons of birth and death. And he says, but the ignorant people call it the original mind, or again, is that the ignorant? That's a tough word, but they call it. It's what we call me. And you all remember, like about 3 weeks ago, I gave a talk. No, a month ago. I said there is no me in mindfulness, right? But anyway, so he says he's sitting there and he says, "Master," and then he says, "Yes." Be mindful. Be awake. Yes. Okay. So he's having. You could say he's schizophrenic, right? Could we say so? This guy actually needs some very serious, right, psychotropic medication because he's got a split personality, right? Or not. Okay, so I just wanted to share. So this is what the translator says, and this is what I wanted to share with you. Those of you who don't have split personality. Ancient records state that Zrayon used to sit. He used to sit quietly on a boulder all day long, and would call to himself that way every day. He would do that when he was sitting, and he would call to himself while he was sitting. Master, yes. Be mindful. Yeah. Framed in this way, the koan shows that Zen meditation is not idle or undirected sitting, but has a definite aim, as illustrated by his calls to himself, to know the true self, to be awake and aware, and to be free from illusion and delusion, developed by learned habits of association and thought. I would say developed by the habit of waiting. Just waiting for God knows what. So we ask these questions, of what is one supposed to do, like when they're, if we're sitting and we're not supposed to be watching the breath, we're not supposed to be watching sensations, all of the many techniques of sitting, and they're wonderful techniques. I don't put any of them down. But I love that because that's an example of apparently what this old guy did while he was sitting. He would say it out loud, but it certainly wouldn't kill you to say it silently, would it? Be awake. Be mindful. What if there's just that sort of constant and continual remembering to be awake? Is that possible? Or does that seem like, well, no, I can't do that because I'd be thinking, right? Right, I can't do that. I'd be well, my goodness, if I did that, it would ruin my meditation because I would be thinking. Well, that's pretty stupid because you're going to be thinking anyway, but you're going to be thinking about dinner, right? Or I'm going to be thinking about that Notre Dame is playing Texas this afternoon. right, at 4:30, so I've got to get the hell out of here. Actually, I literally thought that while I was sitting right very quiet, and just really okay, and then all of a sudden, ooh, that game starts at 4:30. I thought, oh, that's not waiting. That's anticipating, right? That's just another way to entertain yourself, right? And so if you get bored waiting, oh, wait, I know what I've got to do later. Jenny says, oh, I'm playing golf on Wednesday. Well, so I actually suggest to you, I'm not going to, I would say to you that is somewhat what these teachers are about, is they're trying to give you, they're trying to even design what your own investigation should be, but they're trying to help you to have something that you would try to focus on as you're sitting. I do think it's amazing to think, that you are giving yourself 45 minutes. I mean, my God, what a chance, what an opportunity that we give ourselves every, like on Sunday, or it's an amazing opportunity. And yet, if we are drifting off into the same habit that we live our lives, every day, right? If we slip right into that same habit of, well, so it's not a good way to use our time. So I'm going to, it's funny because I was going to say I wanted to do this, but I'm not, because I've already talked long enough. I'm convinced that most of us don't need to hear more than 30 minutes, including myself. So I just wanted to end with a little kind of, my next door neighbor last Sunday, so she's lived there for 5 years. She's she's Hispanic, and has and meaning that so she has lovely family coming over, and so they'll be very happy. So it'll be like a very sort of like joyous sort of thing. And she's like I say, so there'll be some Sundays, and so they'll be just like like maybe there might be like 5 or 6 family members, and so they have the TV going, and there's like chattering. It's like never been too loud, but it's just like kind of nice. So we smile at each other, and she's quite a outgoing person. She's very friendly, and I like her. I've always liked her. So anyway, so I heard kind of like a ruckus last Sunday, just before I came here, actually. And so I thought, gosh, that sounds like she's moving, because you could hear things rolling and everything. And I said, well, no, she couldn't be moving. I mean, she's lived here for 5 years. She would have told her. So I went to my door, and there she stood, and I said, you're not leaving, are you? And she said, yes, I'm moving. So I said, oh, I'm sorry to say that. And her brother, who is a Catholic priest, had just passed away. Very close to her, and had just passed away, and about a month or so before. And so she had decided to move up to Redondo Beach to live with her sister. Anyway, so but there was just this lingering moment. She was just leaving, right? So she said, "Could I come in and just say goodbye?" I said, "Of course." So she came in, and she sat down, and we talked for just maybe 5 minutes. And then so she told me about her brother passing away, and also her sister had passed away. And then just towards the end, she said, "Well, I've got to go." They were all. She had like 4 or 5 people helping her move out, and so she said, "Well, can I give you a hug?" And I said, "Of course, I love hugs." So I gave her a big hug. And as she went went out of the door, she said, she started to say something. And she said, "Oh," she said, "by the way," she said, "I don't think I ever knew your name." I couldn't remember her name. She lived there for 5 years. We said hello every day, or maybe not every day, but we said hello so many times. Her car pulls into next to my car. I had never she didn't have a clue what my name was. I had a sort of, I kind of could have guessed it, and it turned out I was right. But I mean, come on, I'm not trying to get even 3 points out of 100, right? But it was striking to me. I thought, isn't that the way it is, And so I'll never see her again because I'm sure, as life goes on, and it just struck me, of how amazing it is, that how little we really connect to people who are really close to us in some way, at least physically. So this doesn't end, by the way, so this is going to continue a little bit. But it struck me rather poignant and yet so real about the way our lives are now and the way we live in our lives. Pretty separate from one another. So then fast forward to that next week, and so then I'm sitting with a client that night, went on pretty late, who has been processing a very, very, very difficult death in his life, and it's been quite, I would say almost like an awakening experience. Death can break through the barrier that we have. If it's close enough, it can break through tremendous barriers. The irony is, we were processing this, and it's like we've been doing really good work, and he's come very far with it. So he's saying goodbye to me at the door, and we're having a little, and I noticed that a couple of my neighbors were kind of like lingering, it was kind of odd because they didn't want to be intrusive, but they were kind of lingering around the corner, and so he said goodbye. So then I went over and I said, what's going on? And so they said, so they asked me if I knew another neighbor of ours, not her, because she's gone to Redondo Beach. And I said, yes, this is a guy's like 59 years old, rather healthy looking, very nice guy. And very, very nice guy. I don't think I knew his name. I'm sure he didn't know my name. We live in this, it's not a big building. So his best friend had been called my neighbors and said, could you peck on his door, because I'm texting and I can't get any response from him, and I've been calling, I can't get a response from him. So they asked me, for some, so I said, so anyway, the husband went to peck on the door, peck real loud, and so there was a terrible odor. And so we called the police. And what was really kind of amazing to me was this is just after talking with the client, right, who is just processing, tremendous, and really sort of a loss of trust in a way in terms of that, we think we're going to live forever until somebody really close dies, and then sometimes it knocks the hell out of that. So he had been there, he had been lying on the floor for 5 or 6 days. What amazed me so much was, so here we are, there's like maybe 14 police. It was like, very dramatic. They had to come through the window. What so amazed me was how quickly we all went back to normal. It's like, within 2 days, no one was talking about it. No one was thinking about it. It's just like when she moved out, luckily she moved out, she was alive. But it was so amazing to me how we just go back to normal so fast, right? So I walk down the little balcony, and I see his apartment. So I haven't forgotten that so far. But so this is what I wanted to say to you all about that. So this goes back to, so I'm going to bring a little Zen back in. This is some of you know, this is my favorite teacher. And he said, talking about you as a student, as a meditation student, or me, He said we have to find urgency where there is no urgency. We have to we have to get busy where there is no pressure. We have to find importance where there's nothing important. Now, what does that mean? What does that mean? So, some of you know that when I was in Crete 30 years ago, no, longer than that, I was 36 years old. I put on the wall, I tacked it on the wall, a little sign that said, somehow the sense of urgency still escapes me. I wrote that when I was 36 years old. And I think, how on earth could I have been that smart, right, to write that when I was 36? And I never did, I'm just saying I said that. It's not that I got it, because I didn't understand it. I couldn't understand, But I knew somehow there was something that is urgent that escapes me. I couldn't get it. And as I said, I think back and I just think, oh my God. I'm really impressed with that young man at 36. I think, Jesus, how did he... So the sense of urgency is absolutely... Why is it that we can't find the sense of urgency? I think it's exactly like I said. I got past her moving. I forgot about her. This guy that everyone in the building knows lay there right within our complex for 5 days and is gone. And it's as if it didn't happen. Really. What is that? It's if not like some extraordinary denial of the law of anicca, of what the Buddha said, what he taught over and over and over, right? Nothing lasts. The law of anicca is impermanence. If you got that, if I got that, if you got that, if you got that, if we got that, if anyone could get that, and of course I do think it's wasted on the youth somewhat, but anyway, if we got that, why the hell would we have any issue with urgency? Why would we have an issue with urgency if we got the idea that this is a very temporary situation? It's like Basu said to his student who was very ill, and he said, we're a snowflake. So I just wanted to share that with you, that to me that this practice works if we can find urgency where there is no urgency. And what that means is it means that there's no urgency only because we refuse to get it right. That's what he means. He says to find urgency where there is no urgency. He's not implying that you're not going to die tomorrow, right? He's implying that we are so in denial of that we can't experience urgency. And he says to get busy where there's no pressure. How many people get busy when there's pressure? I do. Don't you? Right? I've got a test to pass, right? I get busy, like if you got something that with a rental, right? You get busy when there's pressure. But he's saying you need to get busy where there's no pressure. Because that's the real reason to be busy. And then you find importance where there is no importance, meaning, again, that this stuff is all because we're denying it. We're pushing the reality back. I cannot tell you how many clients I have said who have told me over the past 20 years, I hate reality. And I think, oh my God. Well, that's a very serious statement, really. I hate reality. Come on. So I would just share that with you. That was actually the first part of what I was going to say, but then I decided I wanted to do the second part. To find urgency where there is no urgency, to get busy. I love that. To get busy where there is no pressure. And to find importance where there's no importance. Because life is in reality is just precisely those three. Urgency, pressure, and importance. Sorry. Yeah. So anyway, that's all I have to say. Thank you.